Captain Marcus Chun had seen many things during his 15 years exploring the Outer Rim territories, but nothing prepared him for the sight before him. The massive alien ship hung dead in space, its hull torn open like a broken flower. Emergency lights flickered weakly through the gaps, casting eerie shadows across the debris field. "Sir, I'm reading life signs," reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim. "Faint, but definitely there." Marcus gripped the armrest of his command chair. The ship belonged to the Vorthak Empire, humanity's greatest enemy. For 3 decades, the Vorthak had pushed deeper into human space, conquering colonies and enslaving populations. Their ships were feared throughout the galaxy for their brutal efficiency and advanced weaponry, but this ship was different. It wasn't a warship at all. "It's a refugee vessel," whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the ship's xenobiologist, studying her scanner readings. "Mostly civilians. Women and children." The bridge fell silent. Marcus knew what his crew was thinking. The smart move would be to leave. The Vorthak had never shown mercy to human civilians. Why should humanity be different? Yet something nagged at him. In all his years of service, Marcus had never abandoned anyone in distress, regardless of species. His father had taught him that honor wasn't about who deserved it, but about who you chose to be when nobody was watching. "Prepare the rescue shuttles," Marcus ordered. "Sir?" Lieutenant Kim looked shocked. "These are Vorthak." They would never help us, I know," Marcus interrupted. "But we're not them. We're human. And humans don't leave people to die in the void." The rescue operation took 6 hours. Marcus led the first team personally, cutting through twisted metal to reach the survivors. The ship's artificial gravity had failed, making navigation treacherous. Bodies floated in the corridors, both adult and young. Victims of whatever catastrophe had struck the vessel, they found the survivors huddled in the ship's central chamber, a reinforced section that had somehow maintained life support. Marcus expected to see the typical Vorthak warriors, 7-foot-tall humanoids with gray skin and fierce yellow eyes. Instead, he found families. Mothers holding children. Elderly Vorthak tending to the wounded. At the center of the group sat a figure that made Marcus pause. She was clearly important. Her clothing was finer than the others, and the way the survivors looked to her suggested leadership. But she wasn't what he expected of Vorthak nobility. She was injured, a deep gash across her forehead leaking purple blood. 3 younger females, barely adults by human standards, stayed close to her side. They shared her elegant features but carried themselves like trained fighters despite their youth. When the figure saw Marcus and his team approaching, she struggled to stand. The 3 younger females immediately moved to protect her, but she gestured for them to step back. "Human," she spoke in accented but clear English. "You come to mock the dying?" Marcus removed his helmet, showing his face. "We come to help. Our ship has medical facilities. We can take your people to safety." The alien's yellow eyes widened. Around the chamber, murmurs spread through the survivors. They had clearly expected death or worse from humans. "You would ... help us?" the leader asked, suspicion clear in her voice. "Yes," Marcus replied simply. "No one deserves to die like this." Over the next hour, Marcus's crew evacuated all 43 survivors to their ship, the Meridian. The medical bay worked overtime treating injuries while the crew quarters were reorganized to accommodate their unexpected guests. In the medical bay, Dr. Vasquez tended to the leader's wounds. Through careful questioning, Marcus learned her identity. She was matriarch Zarathic of the Kethmori clan, one of the most powerful families in the Vorthak Empire. The 3 young females were her daughters, Kirathek, Nilathik, and Verithic. "Our ship was attacked by pirates," Zarathic explained, wincing as the doctor worked. "They cared nothing for clan honor or diplomatic immunity. They wanted only to strip our vessel for parts and sell survivors as slaves." Marcus nodded grimly. The Outer Rim was full of such scavengers, preying on anyone weak enough to fall victim. "The pirates damaged our engines and life support systems," she continued. "We drifted for days before your arrival. Many of my people died waiting for rescue that we thought would never come. What was your destination? Marcus asked. Zarathic hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. A peace conference. Secret negotiations between progressive elements in the Empire and your colonial authority. There are many of us who believe this war has gone on too long. This revelation stunned Marcus. He knew there were rumors of Vorthic moderates, but he had never given them much credence. The Empire's propaganda painted all humans as inferior beings worthy only of conquest. The hardliners discovered our mission, Zarathic admitted. They arranged for the pirate attack, making it appear random. They would rather see the Empire burn than make peace with humans. As the Meridian traveled toward the nearest neutral station where the Vorthic could be safely transferred, Marcus found himself spending more time with the matriarch and her daughters. Zarathic was unlike any enemy he had imagined, intelligent, thoughtful, and genuinely grieved by the losses on both sides of the war. Her daughters were equally surprising. Kirathek, the eldest, was a skilled strategist who spoke of military tactics with respect for human ingenuity. Nalathik studied xenobiology and was fascinated by human resilience and adaptability. Varathic, the youngest, was an artist who created beautiful sculptures that somehow captured the tragedy of war in abstract forms. On their final night aboard the Meridian, Zarathic requested a private meeting with Marcus. They met in his quarters, the stars streaming past the viewport behind them. "Captain Chun," she began formally, "you have shown my people kindness when you could have shown cruelty. You have given us life when death was certain. By the ancient codes of my people, I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with mere words or currency." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Matriarch, you owe me nothing. Any decent being would have done the same." Zarathic smiled, a sad expression that made her seem ancient despite her relatively young appearance. "That is where you are wrong, Captain. Very few beings in this galaxy would have risked themselves for strangers, especially strangers from an enemy species. Your actions today will be remembered long after both of us are dust among the stars." She paused, seeming to gather herself for something important. "Tomorrow we part ways. I return to my people to continue working for peace, though the path ahead grows darker each day. But before I go, I must ask something of you that will seem strange, perhaps even insulting." Marcus leaned forward, curious despite himself. "I wish to give you my daughters." Marcus stared at Matriarch Zarathic, certain he had misheard her words. The silence in his quarters stretched uncomfortably as her yellow eyes watched him carefully, gauging his reaction. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Marcus finally managed. "I wish to give you my daughters," Zarathic repeated, her voice steady and formal. "Kirathek, Nylathik, and Varathic? They are yours now, by the ancient laws of my people." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the viewport. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the chaos of mortal concerns. "Matriarch, I think there's been a translation error. You can't give me people. I don't own anyone, and I certainly don't want to own your daughters." Zarathic rose gracefully despite her injuries. "Captain, you misunderstand. This is not slavery. This is something far more sacred and binding. Among my people, when a life debt cannot be repaid, the debtor may offer their most precious possessions as a gesture of absolute trust and gratitude." "Your daughters aren't possessions," Marcus protested. "No, they are not," she agreed. "They are my heart, my legacy, my hope for the future. That is why offering them to you means everything." She moved to stand beside him at the viewport, her reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. In Vorthek culture, when a matriarch gives her daughters to someone, she is declaring that person worthy of her absolute trust. It means she believes that person will protect, guide, and cherish them as she would herself. Marcus shook his head. "But I'm human, we're enemies. This doesn't make sense." "Exactly," Zarathic said softly. "That is what makes it so powerful. When the peace negotiations inevitably fail, when the hardliners on both sides drag us back into war, my daughters will be safe. They will be with someone who has already proven he values life over politics." Before Marcus could respond, the door chimed. At Zarathik's call, 3 figures entered the room. Kirathek, Nalithik, and Virathik stood in formal poses, their expressions unreadable. "Mother has explained the situation to us," Kirathek said, her voice carefully controlled. "We understand and accept the arrangement." Marcus looked between the 4 Vorthek females, feeling increasingly out of his depth. "This is insane. You're talking about giving up your children to a stranger." "Not a stranger," Nilithik spoke up, her scientific curiosity evident even in this bizarre situation. "We have observed you for days, Captain. We have seen how you treat your crew, how you make decisions, how you carry yourself. Mother's judgment is sound." Varathik, the youngest, stepped forward. Her artistic nature made her the most expressive of the sisters. "Captain Chun, do you know what it means to be Battleborn among our people?" Marcus shook his head. "It means we were born during wartime, raised to expect nothing but conflict and death," she explained. "We have never known peace, never seen a future beyond the next battle. When you rescued us, you showed us something we thought was myth, mercy without expectation of reward. The ancient texts speak of such beings," Karathek added. "Warriors who fight not for conquest but for protection. Leaders who choose compassion even when it costs them. We thought they were legends." Zarathik nodded approvingly at her daughter's words. "You see, Captain? They understand what I am offering. This is not about ownership or control. This is about family." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Family, he thought of his own parents, long dead. His brother, killed in the war's early years. The crew of the Meridian had become his family, but they were all adults who had chosen their paths. What exactly would this arrangement involve? He asked carefully. "They would serve aboard your ship," Zarathik explained. "Not as prisoners or slaves, but as crew members under your protection and guidance. They would learn from you, grow under your example, and hopefully become bridges between our peoples when the time comes." "And if they want to leave?" Marcus asked. "Then they leave," Karathek answered immediately. "We are not prisoners, Captain. We choose this freely." Marcus studied their faces, looking for any sign of coercion or fear. He found only determination and something that might have been hope. "Why not keep them with you?" he asked Zarathik. "Surely you can protect them better than I can." The matriarch's expression grew pained. "Because I will likely be dead within the year. The hardliners know I was working toward peace. They allowed the pirates to attack us as a warning. Next time they will be more direct." The room fell silent again. Marcus could see the love and desperation in Zarathik's eyes. She was a mother trying to save her children the only way she could. "If I agree to this," Marcus said slowly, "what happens when the war escalates? When my superiors find out I'm harboring enemy aliens?" "You tell them we are defectors," Nilithik suggested. "Vorthek who have rejected the Empire and seek to join humanity's cause. It would not be entirely false. The colonial authority would want to interrogate you, study you, possibly use you as propaganda tools," Marcus warned. "Better that than death," Varathik said simply. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. 3 young women who had known nothing but war, offering to trust their lives to a human they had met only days before. Their mother, watching him with eyes that held both hope and resignation, he thought about his crew's reaction. Lieutenant Kim would probably question his sanity. Dr. Vasquez would be fascinated by the opportunity to study Vorthek physiology and culture. The rest of his people would follow his lead, as they always had. "There would be conditions," Marcus said finally. "Strict ones. You would start at the bottom of the crew hierarchy. You would earn your positions through merit, not through any special status. You would follow human military protocols and regulations." "We understand," Kirathek nodded. "You would be subject to the same discipline as any crew member. No special treatment because of your species or your mother's status. We would expect nothing less," Nalithik agreed. "And you would never be required to act against your own people in combat. I won't turn you into weapons against the Vorthek Empire." "We appreciate that consideration," Varathik said softly. Marcus took a deep breath. Every instinct told him this was a terrible idea. His training said it was a security risk. His experience warned him about the political complications that would follow. But his heart, the part of him that had driven him to rescue them in the first place, told him it was right. "Then I accept," he said formally. "Kirithek, Nilathik, and Verithik, if you truly choose this path, you are welcome aboard the Meridian." Zarathik closed her eyes briefly, relief washing over her features. When she opened them again, they shimmered with unshed tears. "There is one final ceremony," she said. "To make the bond official by our laws, will you permit it?" Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. What happened next would change everything. The ceremony took place in the Meridian's main cargo bay, hastily cleared and arranged according to Zarathik's specific instructions. Word had spread throughout the ship, and most of the crew gathered to witness the unprecedented event. Marcus could see curiosity, concern, and skepticism on their faces as they watched the preparations. Zarathik had requested several items from the ship's stores: water, salt, a piece of metal from the ship's hull, and something burning. Dr. Vasquez had provided a small torch that burned with a steady blue flame. The matriarch arranged these elements in a precise pattern on the deck, forming symbols that looked ancient and significant. "Among my people," Zarathik explained as she worked, "family bonds are not just emotional connections. They are spiritual contracts that bind souls across time and space. What we do here today will be recognized by every Vorthek clan, including those who consider me a traitor." Kirithek, Nilathik, and Verithik stood in a line, wearing simple gray robes that Zarathik had fashioned from spare fabric. They had painted intricate symbols on their faces with a dye made from crushed berries from the ship's hydroponics bay. Their expressions were solemn and reverent. "Captain," Zarathik gestured for Marcus to take his place at the center of the pattern, "please remove your gloves and jacket. This ceremony requires skin contact with the elements." Marcus complied, feeling increasingly nervous as the formal nature of the event became clear. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was something that would have real legal and cultural weight among the Vorthak. "Before we begin," Zarathik announced loudly enough for all to hear, "let all present understand what occurs here. By the ancient laws of the Kethmori clan, I, Matriarch Zarathik, formally transfer guardianship of my daughters to Captain Marcus Chun of the human vessel Meridian. This transfer is made freely, without coercion, as payment of a life debt that cannot otherwise be repaid." She paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Do you, Marcus Chun, accept this responsibility? Do you swear to protect, guide, and cherish these three as if they were born of your own blood?" The weight of the moment pressed down on Marcus. He could feel the eyes of his crew, the expectant faces of the Vorthak survivors, and most importantly, the hopeful expressions of three young women who were entrusting their futures to him. "I do," he said clearly. Zarathik smiled, the first genuinely happy expression he had seen from her. "Then let the ceremony begin." She dipped her hands in the water, then sprinkled it over Marcus's head. "Water represents life and renewal. You give my daughters new life, new purpose, new hope." Next came the salt, which she rubbed into his palms. "Salt represents tears shed and bonds forged in hardship. You have seen our pain and chosen to ease it." The piece of hull metal was heated in the flame until it glowed red-hot. Zarathik used a tool to place it briefly against Marcus's forearm, leaving a small burn that would heal into a permanent mark. "Metal represents strength and endurance. Your strength now protects my daughters." Finally, she passed the torch over his head, the heat warming his scalp. "Fire represents the spark of soul that connects all living beings. Your soul now recognizes them as family." Each daughter stepped forward in turn. Kirithek first, as the eldest. "I, Kirithek of Clan Kethmori, accept Marcus Chun as my guardian and guide," she said formally, then knelt and pressed her forehead to his hand. "I offer my skills in strategy and warfare to his service." Nilathik followed. "I, Nilathik of Clan Kethmori, accept Marcus Chun as my guardian and guide. I offer my knowledge of science and healing to his service." Finally, Verithik stepped up. "I, Verithik of Clan Kethmori, accept Marcus Chun as my guardian and guide. I offer my insights into beauty and creation to his service." When all three had spoken their oaths, Zarathik raised her hands. "By water and salt, by metal and flame, by the ancient laws of our people, and the witness of the stars themselves, let it be known that these three are now daughters of Marcus Chin's house. May this bond bring honor to both our peoples." The Vorthik survivors began a low, harmonious chanting that sent chills down Marcus's spine. Even some of his crew looked moved by the solemnity and beauty of the moment. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus found himself face to face with three young women who were now, in the eyes of their people, his daughters. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. "So what happens now?" he asked Zarathik quietly. "Now you learn to be a father to warriors," she replied with a slight smile. "And they learn to be daughters to a human." Over the next several hours, as the Meridian approached the neutral station where the Vorthik refugees would disembark, Marcus began to understand the magnitude of the change in his life. Zarathik spent time with each daughter privately, giving final instructions and blessings. The partings were emotional but controlled, as befitted a warrior culture. When the time came for Zarathik to leave, she requested one final private moment with Marcus. "There are things you must know about my daughters," she said urgently. "Things that will help you understand and protect them." Marcus listened intently as she explained the unique challenges each girl faced. Kirathek's fierce pride could make her reckless in combat. She needed someone to teach her when to fight and when to withdraw. Nilathik's scientific curiosity sometimes led her to dangerous experiments. She needed guidance to channel her intelligence safely. Verithik's artistic sensitivity made her vulnerable to emotional manipulation. She needed protection from those who might use her compassionate nature against her. "They are strong, but they are young," Zarathik emphasized. "They have lived their entire lives in the shadow of war. You must teach them that there is more to existence than conflict and survival." "What if I fail them?" Marcus asked, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "You will not," Zarathik said with absolute certainty. "A man who risks himself for strangers will not abandon those who have become family. Trust yourself, Captain. Trust them. And remember that love is not about being perfect. It is about never giving up." As the transfer shuttle prepared to depart with the Vorthik refugees, Zarathik embraced each of her daughters one final time. There were tears, but also strength and determination. These women had survived a lifetime of war. They would survive this separation too. Standing on the bridge afterward, watching the neutral station grow smaller in the distance, Marcus found himself with three new crew members and a completely changed understanding of his mission in the galaxy. Kirathek stood at attention beside the tactical console, already studying human weapon systems with professional interest. Nilathik had been eagerly questioning Dr. Vasquez about human medical techniques. Verithik gazed out at the stars with wonder, seeing them perhaps for the first time not as a battlefield but as a canvas for infinite possibility. "Captain," Lieutenant Kim approached hesitantly, "Command is requesting our next destination." Marcus considered their options. They could return to human space, where his new crew members would face interrogation and suspicion. They could patrol the neutral zone, where pirates and criminals posed constant threats. Or they could chart their own course, using the unique situation to build something entirely new. "Set course for the Kepler Research Station," he decided. "I think it's time our new crew members learned what humans can do when we're not fighting for survival." Behind him, he heard Verithik whisper something in her native language. Nilathik translated softly. "She says the stars look different now. More beautiful." Marcus smiled. Perhaps this impossible arrangement might work after all. 3 months had passed since the ceremony that changed everything aboard the Meridian. The ship now felt different, more alive somehow, with new perspectives and voices adding to the daily rhythm of military life. Marcus had initially worried about how his crew would adapt to their unusual new members. But those concerns had proven largely unfounded. Kirathek, had thrown herself into learning human military doctrine with the same intensity she had once applied to Vorthak warfare. She sparred daily with the ship's security team, teaching them Vorthak combat techniques while learning human ones. Her strategic insights had already improved their tactical responses during 2 pirate encounters. "Captain," she reported one morning during the daily briefing, "I've completed my analysis of the raider attack. Patterns in Sector 7. Their movements suggest coordination with someone who has access to shipping schedules." Marcus nodded approvingly. Kira's ability to spot patterns that others missed had quickly made her invaluable to the ship's operations. "Recommendations? We should investigate the civilian shipping coordinator on Haven Station. The attack timings are too precise to be coincidental." Lieutenant Kim, who had initially been skeptical of the Vorthak additions to their crew, now regularly sought Kira's input on security matters. "I'll prepare the investigation protocols," she offered. Galactic had integrated even more smoothly into ship operations. Her medical knowledge, while different from human practices, had proven complementary to Dr. Vasquez's expertise. Together, they had developed new treatments for several conditions that affected both species. "The neural interface compatibility tests are complete," Nala reported from the medical station. "The Vorthak refugees from the cargo ship 7 months ago should be able to use standard human prosthetics with only minor modifications." Dr. Vasquez smiled proudly. "Nala's understanding of cross-species neurology has been remarkable. We're actually planning to publish our findings in the Journal of Xenobiology." Vorthak had perhaps adapted most surprisingly of all. Her artistic nature had found expression in redesigning the ship's common areas, making them more welcoming and beautiful. She had also begun chronicling their missions through sculptures and paintings that captured the human experience in ways that words could not, but it was her work with the ship's counseling program that had truly impressed Marcus. Her empathic abilities allowed her to connect with crew members struggling with the stress of military life in ways that traditional counselors sometimes could not, and San Rodriguez has been having nightmares about the battle at Proxima Station, Vera reported during their weekly private meeting. "His trauma responses are similar to what I experienced during the siege of Kethra Prime. I believe I can help him process the experience." Marcus had learned to value these weekly meetings with each of his adopted daughters. They served multiple purposes, keeping him informed of their adjustment, allowing them to voice concerns, and deepening the family bond that had formed between them. Today's meeting with Kira carried additional weight. Long-range communications had brought disturbing news from Vorthak space. "Tell me about your mother's last message," Marcus said gently. Kira's expression remained controlled, but Marcus had learned to read the subtle signs of Vorthak emotion. Her jaw was slightly tense, her posture more rigid than usual. "The Peace Faction has been declared treasonous by the High Council," she reported clinically. "Mother and her allies are being hunted as criminals. Several have already been captured and executed publicly." Marcus felt a chill run through him. "And Zarathik?" "Missing. Presumed dead." Kira's voice cracked almost imperceptibly on the last word. Marcus reached across his desk and placed his hand over hers. Physical comfort was still awkward between them. Vorthak culture was more formal than human, but she did not pull away. "I'm sorry," he said simply. They sat in silence for several moments before Kira spoke again. "She knew this would happen. That is why she gave us to you. She saved us not just from death, but from witnessing her destruction. How are your sisters handling the news?" Nala has thrown herself into her research. She believes if she can prove the medical benefits of human-Vorthak cooperation, it might eventually help restore peace. Kira paused. "Vera has not spoken since we received the transmission." Marcus made a mental note to check on Vera later. The youngest sister had always been the most emotionally vulnerable. "And you?" he asked. "How are you handling this?" For the first time since he had known her, Kira's composure cracked completely. Tears flowed down her gray cheeks as she struggled to maintain her warrior's bearing. "I want revenge," she whispered fiercely. I want to make them pay for what they did to her. But I know that is exactly what she would not want. She died for peace, and here I am dreaming of war. Marcus moved around the desk and awkwardly placed his arms around her shoulders. She stiffened initially, then collapsed against him, sobbing with the force of months of suppressed grief. Grief makes us want to strike out, he said softly. It's natural. But your mother was wise enough to know that violence only creates more violence. Then what do we do? Kira asked through her tears. How do we honor her memory? We continue the work she started, Marcus replied. We prove that humans and Vorthak can live and work together. We become the bridge she dreamed of building. Over the following weeks, the loss of their mother brought the three sisters closer to Marcus and to each other. They began sharing traditional Vorthak meals in the evening, teaching the human crew about their culture while learning about human customs in return. It was during one of these cultural exchange dinners that Lieutenant Kim made an unexpected announcement. Captain, we've received new orders from command, she said. Holding a datapad with obvious reluctance, Marcus sensed bad news. What kind of orders? We're to report to Starbase Delta 7 for a full inspection and crew review. Specifically, command wants to interview our non-human personnel. The silence that fell over the dining hall was deafening. Everyone understood what this meant. The Colonial Authority had finally learned about the Vorthak sisters and wanted to conduct their own evaluation of the situation. When do we need to report? Marcus asked. 2 weeks, Kim replied grimly. Marcus looked around the table at his crew, human and Vorthak alike. These people had become more than colleagues. They were family. The thought of losing any of them to bureaucratic paranoia was unacceptable. Captain, Kira spoke carefully, we understand if you need to. Explain our presence differently to your superiors. We could present ourselves as defectors rather than family members, Nala suggested. It might be politically easier. No, Marcus said firmly. We're not hiding what we've become. You're crew members of this ship, and you're my daughters by choice and ceremony. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. Dr. Vasquez nodded approvingly. The medical benefits alone of having Vorthak crew members should convince any reasonable authority. Command isn't always reasonable when it comes to alien integration. Lieutenant Kim warned. Marcus stood, his decision made. Then we'll have to make them understand. We have 2 weeks to prepare the most convincing case for interspecies cooperation that the Colonial Authority has ever seen. Vorthak spoke for the first time in days, her voice quiet but determined. Mother always said that changing minds required changing hearts first. Perhaps it is time to show them not just what we can do, but who we have become. As the crew began planning their presentation for the inspection, Marcus felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The next 2 weeks would determine not just the fate of his adopted daughters, but possibly the future of human Vorthak relations. The galaxy was about to get its first real test of whether two species could truly become one family. Starbase Delta 7 loomed ahead of the meridian like a mechanical mountain, its massive bulk blotting out the stars beyond. Marcus stood on the bridge, watching the approach with growing tension. In just a few hours, everything he and his crew had built together would be subjected to the cold scrutiny of military bureaucracy. Docking Bay 7 has been assigned to us, Lieutenant Kim reported. Full inspection team is standing by, along with representatives from Intelligence Division and Xenobiology Command. The presence of Intelligence Division was particularly concerning. They weren't interested in scientific cooperation or cultural exchange. They wanted information that could be used as weapons against the Vorthak Empire. Captain, Kira approached from her station. Her posture perfectly military despite the uncertainty she must be feeling. My sisters and I have prepared statements regarding our defection and integration. We are ready for whatever questions they might ask. Marcus nodded, though he remained worried. The past 2 weeks had been intensive preparation. They had compiled medical reports showing the benefits of Vorthak-human cooperation, tactical analyses demonstrating improved ship performance, and psychological evaluations, proving the sisters' loyalty and adjustment, but Marcus knew that data and logic wouldn't be enough if the inspection team had already decided to see the Vorthak as threats rather than allies. The docking procedures went smoothly, but Marcus noticed the unusual number of security personnel on the landing bay. Armed guards flanked the inspection party, their weapons prominently displayed. The message was clear. The Colonial Authority viewed this as a potential security situation. Admiral Rebecca Thorne led the inspection team, her silver hair and stern expression giving her an intimidating presence. Marcus had served under her early in his career and knew her to be fair but uncompromising when it came to military protocol. "Captain Chun," she greeted him formally as she boarded the ship. "I trust you understand why we're here." "Of course, Admiral. My crew is prepared to answer any questions you might have." "Good, because frankly, Marcus, when I received the report about your unusual personnel decisions, I thought there had been some kind of communication error." Her eyes swept the bridge, noting the subtle changes that Verithic's artistic touch had brought to the space. "But here we are." The initial inspection proceeded normally. The team reviewed ship systems, interviewed crew members, and examined operational records. Marcus could see that they were impressed by the Meridian's performance statistics. Efficiency was up, crew satisfaction had improved, and their mission success rate was exceptional. It was when they reached the formal interviews with the Vorthak sisters that the atmosphere became tense. Commander James Walsh from Intelligence Division took the lead, his questions clearly designed to probe for security risks rather than understand integration success. "Kirithek," he began, deliberately mispronouncing her name. "How do we know you're not a sleeper agent planted by the Vorthak Empire?" Kira's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "Commander, my mother and her entire political faction were declared traitors and hunted down by the Empire. If I were a spy, it would be a remarkably poor cover story. Convenient that all evidence of this supposed persecution comes from sources we can't verify." Walsh pressed before Kira could respond. Dr. Vasquez interrupted. "Actually, Commander, we have verified much of their information through independent sources. The medical knowledge they've shared has been consistent with captured Vorthak equipment and biological samples." Walsh turned his attention to Nelithik next. "Your access to our medical systems represents a significant security vulnerability. What's to stop you from introducing biological weapons?" Nala's scientific mind engaged immediately. "Commander, any biological agent I could introduce would affect my own physiology as well. Since Vorthak and human biology share numerous commonalities, it would be essentially suicide." "Unless you're willing to die for your cause," Walsh suggested coldly. Marcus had heard enough. "Commander Walsh, these women have served aboard my ship for 3 months with distinction. They've saved human lives, improved our operational efficiency, and demonstrated absolute loyalty to this crew." "Captain Chun," Admiral Thorne interrupted, "the commander raises valid security concerns. The integration of enemy aliens into our military structure is unprecedented." "They're not enemy aliens," Marcus replied firmly. "They're refugees who chose to ally with us." "There's a difference." The questioning continued for hours, with Walsh becoming increasingly aggressive in his approach. Marcus watched his daughters handle the interrogation with patience and dignity, but he could see the strain building. It was when Walsh began questioning Verithik that Marcus's patience finally snapped. "So you're some kind of artist," Walsh said dismissively, "studying Vera's psychological profile. Tell me, what do you think about when you create your little sculptures? Do you dream of Vorthak victory?" Vera, who had been quietly composed throughout her questioning, suddenly looked up with fire in her yellow eyes. "I dream of beauty, Commander," she said softly. "I dream of a galaxy where children don't grow up expecting to die in war. I dream of ships like this one, where beings from different worlds work together instead of killing each other." She stood gracefully and moved to one of her sculptures displayed. In the meeting room, a flowing, abstract piece that somehow captured the essence of hope emerging from despair. "When I create, I think about my mother, who died believing that peace was possible. I think about Captain Chun, who risked everything to save strangers. I think about this crew, who accepted us not because they had to, but because they chose to see us as people rather than enemies. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. You ask what I dream about, Commander. I dream about proving my mother right. I dream about earning the trust that Captain Chun placed in us. And yes, I dream about a Vorthek victory, a victory of compassion over hatred, of unity over division. The room fell silent. Even Walsh seemed taken aback by the passionate sincerity of her response. Admiral Thorne studied Vera thoughtfully. That's quite a speech, young lady. But dreams don't change the reality of military necessity. Don't they? Dr. Vasquez interjected. Admiral, the medical breakthroughs we've achieved working with Nala have applications far beyond this ship. The tactical innovations Kira has brought could revolutionize our defensive strategies. And Vera's psychological insights have helped crew members deal with trauma in ways our standard protocols couldn't match. The question, Lieutenant Kim added, isn't whether they're valuable to us. The question is whether we're wise enough to recognize that value. Marcus looked around the room at his crew, human and Vorthak alike, standing together in defense of their unusual family. 3 months ago, he never could have imagined this moment. Admiral Thorne seemed to reach some internal decision. Commander Walsh, I think we've heard enough for now. I'd like to observe normal ship operations for the remainder of the day. Walsh clearly wanted to continue his aggressive questioning, but he nodded reluctantly as the inspection team dispersed to observe different ship functions. Marcus found himself alone with Admiral Thorne in his quarters. You've put me in a difficult position, Marcus, she said without preamble. Command is divided on how to handle this situation. Half want to study your Vorthik crew members like laboratory specimens. The other half want them transferred to detention facilities for extended interrogation. And what do you want, Admiral? Thorne moved to the viewport, watching the stars beyond the starbase. I want to understand how you made this work. Because if human Vorthik cooperation is possible on this scale, it could change everything about how we approach this war. It's possible because we stopped seeing them as enemies and started seeing them as people. Marcus replied simply, It can't be that simple, can it? Marcus asked, Admiral, those 3 women have become part of this ship's family. Not because of any political agenda or strategic plan, but because we all chose to trust each other. Thorne turned back to face him. And if I recommend that they be allowed to remain with your crew? Then you'll be betting that trust and compassion are stronger than fear and prejudice. That's a big bet. Marcus, it's the only bet worth making, Admiral. As evening approached, Marcus knew that the next morning would bring Admiral Thorne's final decision. Everything they had built together hung in the balance, waiting for bureaucracy to decide whether love could triumph over politics. Dawn came slowly to Starbase Delta 7, the artificial day cycle beginning with a gentle brightening of the corridor lights. Marcus had barely slept, spending most of the night walking the ship and thinking about the decision that awaited them. He found his daughters in the common room, sitting together in quiet conversation. Good morning, he said softly, joining them at their table. Captain, Kira nodded formally, though her eyes showed the strain of the past day's interrogation. We have been discussing contingencies, Nala said with scientific precision, though Marcus could hear the emotion beneath her clinical tone. If Admiral Thorne decides to separate us from the crew, we want you to know that we understand. We don't want to cause problems for you or the others, Vera added, her artistic sensitivity making her especially attuned to the ship's emotional atmosphere. Marcus studied their faces, these 3 young women who had somehow become central to his life in just a few months. You're not causing problems. You're family. And families stick together, whatever comes. Before any of them could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Captain Chun, please report to Conference Room Alpha. Admiral Thorne is ready to deliver her decision. The walk to the conference room felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. His crew lined the corridors, their faces showing solidarity and support. Whatever happened next, they had all chosen their side, Admiral Thorne sat at the head of the conference table, her expression unreadable. Commander Walsh flanked her, looking frustrated and impatient. The inspection team's other members were present, along with Marcus's senior staff and the three Vorthek sisters. Captain Chun, Admiral Thorne began formally. This has been one of the most unusual inspection processes in my 30 years of service. The situation you've created here defies every protocol and precedent we have for handling enemy aliens in military settings. Marcus felt his heart sinking, but he kept his expression neutral. However, the Admiral continued, it also represents something that our military has been struggling to achieve for decades: genuine cooperation between human and Vorthak personnel. She paused, looking around the room at the mixed crew. I've spent the past 18 hours reviewing performance data, medical reports, psychological evaluations, and tactical analyses. I've also spent considerable time observing how your crew actually functions together. Commander Walsh shifted impatiently in his chair, clearly unhappy with the direction of the Admiral's statement. The numbers don't lie, Admiral Thorne said. Ship efficiency is up 23%. Crew psychological well-being scores have improved across all metrics. Mission success rates have increased significantly. Medical breakthroughs achieved through interspecies cooperation have potential applications throughout the fleet. She stood, moving to the viewport that looked out at the vast starbase surrounding them. But more importantly, I've observed something that no amount of data can quantify: genuine trust and loyalty between species that have been at war for 30 years. Yesterday, I watched human crew members instinctively move to shield their Vorthak colleagues during Commander Walsh's more aggressive questioning. I saw Vorthak personnel demonstrate concern for human welfare that went far beyond mere professional obligation. Marcus dared to hope that the decision might go their way. Commander Walsh, Admiral Thorne turned to face the intelligence officer. Your concerns about security are noted and understood. However, they must be weighed against the unprecedented opportunity this situation represents. Walsh's jaw tightened. Admiral, with respect, we cannot allow sentiment to override security protocols. These aliens could be gathering intelligence, mapping our ship designs, learning our tactical procedures. Commander, Kira interrupted respectfully, may I respond to that concern? Walsh looked annoyed, but Admiral Thorne nodded permission. Kira stood with military precision. In the 3 months I have served aboard this vessel, I have indeed learned about human tactical procedures, ship designs, and operational methods. I have also shared equivalent Vorthak information with Captain Chun's crew. This is what cooperation means: mutual trust and mutual benefit. She paused, meeting Walsh's gaze directly. If I were a spy, Commander, I would have far more valuable intelligence from my previous position as a strategic advisor to my mother's faction than anything I could gather from one human ship. And if my sisters and I were saboteurs, we have had countless opportunities to act. Instead, we have chosen to protect and serve alongside our human colleagues. Nala stood next. Commander Walsh, from a scientific perspective, the medical knowledge we have shared could have been used to develop biological weapons against humans. Instead, we have used it to develop treatments that save human lives. Actions speak louder than suspicions. Finally, Vera rose gracefully. Commander, you asked yesterday what I dream about. I dream about the day when questions like yours become unnecessary, when the idea of betraying people who have become family is as unthinkable as betraying oneself. Admiral Thorne nodded slowly. Which brings me to my decision. The room fell completely silent. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. The integration of Karathek, Nalathik, and Verathik into the crew of the Meridian will be allowed to continue, Admiral Thorne announced. Furthermore, this arrangement will serve as a pilot program for expanded interspecies cooperation throughout the colonial fleet. The relief that washed over Marcus was overwhelming, but Admiral Thorne wasn't finished. However, this decision comes with conditions. The Meridian will be reassigned to special operations focusing on diplomatic and humanitarian missions. You will be regularly monitored and evaluated. Any security concerns or operational failures will result in immediate termination of the program. Commander Walsh looked like he had swallowed something bitter, but he nodded acceptance of the decision. Additionally, Admiral Thorne continued, I am promoting you to Commodore Marcus. Your new mission will be to develop protocols for interspecies integration that can be replicated throughout the fleet. Congratulations. Marcus was stunned. He had expected to fight to keep his crew together, not to be given expanded authority and responsibility. There's one more thing, Admiral Thorne said, a slight smile crossing her stern features. The 3 Vorthic crew members will be granted full colonial citizenship and commissioned as officers in the colonial fleet. Lieutenant Kirathek will serve as tactical officer. Lieutenant Nalathik will serve as chief medical research officer. Lieutenant Verathik will serve as chief morale and psychological welfare officer. The room erupted in cheers from the Meridian's crew. Marcus saw tears streaming down his daughters' faces as they struggled to maintain military composure. Later, after the formal ceremonies and paperwork were complete, Marcus found himself alone with his 3 daughters in his quarters. So, he said with a smile, how does it feel to be colonial fleet officers? Overwhelming, Nala admitted. I never imagined such acceptance was possible. Mother would be proud, Kira said softly. We have become the bridge she dreamed of building. What happens now? Vera asked. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about their new mission and the challenges ahead. Now we prove that what we've built here can work on a larger scale. We show the galaxy that human and Vorthak can be more than enemies. We can be family. It won't be easy, Kira warned. There will be resistance from both sides. There always is, Marcus agreed. But we'll face it together, as we always have. 6 months later, the Meridian led a small fleet of ships with mixed human-Vorthak crews on a diplomatic mission to the border worlds. The war was far from over, but something new had begun, a different kind of hope based not on the defeat of enemies, but on the transformation of enemies into family. In her final transmission before disappearing into the underground resistance, Matriarch Zarathik had written, Honor is not about being perfect. It is about choosing to love when love seems impossible. Standing on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by his crew, human and Vorthak, bound together not by law or duty but by choice and love, Marcus finally understood what she meant. The stars ahead held infinite possibilities. And for the first time in 30 years of war, those possibilities included peace. The 3 sisters who had once been Battleborn, daughters of an alien empire, were now officers in the colonial fleet, living bridges between 2 worlds that had forgotten how to trust. Their mother's sacrifice had not been in vain. Honor, Marcus realized, was not just about keeping promises to the dead. It was about creating hope for the living, and in the depths of space, surrounded by family chosen rather than born, that hope burned as bright as the stars themselves.